Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Playing with Power MTG, where we play with the most powerful cards in the most powerful formats. Tonight's game is brought to you by TCGplayer.com, where you can find all of your cards online while still supporting local game stores. Dragon Shield for all the best accessories to protect your decks, and through Patreon, where you get awesome benefits for your direct support. We have recently revamped our Patreon and added new tiers, including a special limited tier that allows you to play directly with us and be on a future episode of Playing with Power. Those spots are limited, so act soon. Jesper Ejsing is back. When we played with Jesper on a previous episode, he played Alela against us and won with an amazing Thassa's Oracle combo win. We played multiple games that day, and it's time for the team to get a rematch against Jesper. So we brought out different decks and played another game. We encourage you to support Jesper by checking out some of the links below and purchasing some of his playmats, prints, tutorials, and more. Also, check out his social media, which is also listed in the description. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Jesper piloting Omnath, Locust of the Royal. This deck is a Lands Matter deck that seeks to use synergies with landfall abilities and use its commander to pressure opponents. Jesper's opening hand contains a Misty Rainforest, Burgeoning, Field of the Dead, Polluted Delta, Bloodstained Mire, Crop Rotation, and a Ghostly Flicker. Next, we have Ryan piloting Alela, Artful Provocateur. This deck is a disruptive deck, seeking to stack the board state and pressure opponents with an ever-increasing army of fairies. Ryan's opening hand contains a Chalice of the Void, Underground Sea, Karn the Great Creator, Swords to Plowshares, Drannith Magistrate, Thorn of Amethyst, and a Polluted Delta. After that, we have Garrett piloting Teferi, Temporal Archmage. This deck is a proactive deck, seeking to use its commander in conjunction with the Chain Veil to go infinite and win the game. Garrett's opening hand contains a Soul Ring, Force of Negation, Spell Pierce, Muddle the Mixture, 2 Snow-Covered Islands, and his London Mulligan is a Chain of Vapor. Finally, we have Folger piloting Kenrith, the Return King. This deck is a disruptive deck, seeking to control the board state before going for the win with a number of combos. Folger's opening hand contains a Steam Vents, Mox Diamond, Underground River, Noble Hierarch, Bloodstained Mire, Flusterstorm, and a Stomping Ground. Without further ado, let's kick off this torrential tattling of treacherous travelers. Ryan wins the What's in the Sandwich challenge and gets to start us off. Ryan draws a card for turn and then plays a Polluted Delta. Ryan passes. Folger draws a card for turn and then plays a Steam Vents into play tapped. He casts a Mox Diamond, discarding an Underground River. He casts Noble Hierarch and passes the turn. Jesper draws a card for turn and then plays a Misty Rainforest. He cracks it for a Tropical Island. He casts a Burgeoning. With this fantastic turn 1 play, Jesper passes. Garrett draws a card for turn and then plays a Snow-Covered Island. Jesper's Burgeoning triggers, and Jesper puts a Polluted Delta onto the battlefield. Then Garrett casts a Soul Ring. He passes. At the end of Garrett's turn, Ryan cracks his Polluted Delta to fetch up a Tundra. Ryan draws, and then plays an Underground Sea for turn. Jesper's Burgeoning triggers, and he puts a Bloodstained Mire onto the battlefield. Ryan then casts Drannith Magistrate. Shutting off everyone's plans, Ryan passes the turn. At the end of Ryan's turn, Folger attempts to school Jesper on how good of an artist he is. Folger draws, and then plays a Bloodstained Mire. Burgeoning triggers, with Jesper putting a Field of the Dead onto the battlefield, which is a big problem for the table. Folger moves to combat and attacks Garrett with his Noble Hierarch. Hierarch's Exalted triggers, giving itself +1/+1. Garrett takes it, and Folger passes the turn. At the end of Folger's turn, Jesper cracks his Bloodstained Mire and Polluted Delta. He fetches up a Volcanic Island with one, and a Tiger with the other. Then the turn moves to Jesper. Jesper draws, and then plays a Prismatic Vista for turn. He then evokes Slither Muse. Jesper holds priority and cracks his Prismatic Vista to fetch up a forest. With Slither Muse still on the stack, Jesper casts Crop Rotation, sacrificing his newly found forest. He then fetches up a Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, onto the battlefield. With nothing else, Slither Muse resolves, and since Ryan has 6 cards in hand and Jesper has 1, he draws 5 cards. All through, Jesper passes. Garrett draws and then plays a Snow-Covered Island for turn. Burgeoning triggers, and Jesper puts a City of Brass onto the battlefield. Garrett passes. Ryan draws and then plays a Phyrexian Tower for turn. Burgeoning triggers, and Jesper puts a Verdant Catacombs onto the battlefield. Field of the Dead triggers, and Jesper creates a 2/2 zombie. Ryan then casts Thorn of Amethyst. Ryan passes. At the end of Ryan's turn, Folger cracks his Bloodstained Mire for a Watery Grave, into play tapped. Then Jesper cracks his Verdant Catacombs for a forest. Field of the Dead triggers, and Jesper creates a 2/2 zombie. Still in the end step, Jesper taps his City of Brass to cast Chain of Vapor, targeting Ryan's Drannith Magistrate. In response, Garrett casts Spell Pierce, targeting Chain of Vapor in order to keep Jesper off of casting his commander. In response, Folger casts Flusterstorm, with all copies targeting Spell Pierce. Spell Pierce is countered, and with Chain of Vapor still on the stack, Garrett casts Force of Negation, exiling a blue card from his hand, targeting Chain of Vapor. Force of Negation resolves, and Chain of Vapor is countered and exiled. Then the turn moves to Folger. Folger draws, and then plays a Stomping Ground, into play tapped. He attacks Garrett again with his Noble Hierarch. Garrett takes it, and in his second main phase, Folger casts Mana Crypt, paying the 1 extra for Thorn of Amethyst. All through, Folger passes. Jesper draws, and starts off his turn by casting Rhystic Study. He then casts Llanowar Elves. He attacks Garrett with 2 zombies. Garrett takes it, and Jesper passes the turn. Garrett draws, and then plays a Snow-Covered Island for turn. Garrett passes. Ryan draws, and then plays a Godless Shrine, into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts his commander, Alela, Artful Provocateur. Rhystic Study triggers, and Jesper draws a card. Finished up, Ryan passes. During his upkeep, Folger loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He plays a City of Brass for turn. Burgeoning triggers, and Jesper puts an island onto the battlefield. Field of the Dead triggers, and Jesper creates a 2/2 zombie. He attacks Garrett with his Noble Hierarch. Garrett takes it, and Folger passes the turn. Jesper draws, and then starts off his turn by casting Titania, Protector of Argoth. In response, Folger casts Counterspell, paying for Rhystic Study. Titania is countered, and Jesper follows up by casting Green Sun Zenith, where X equals 0, paying for Thorn. He fetches up a Dryad Arbor onto the battlefield, and shuffles Green Suns back into his library. Field of the Dead triggers, and Jesper creates a 2/2 zombie. He attacks Folger with 3 zombies. Folger takes it, and Jesper passes the turn. Garrett draws, and starts off his turn by casting Sensei's Divining Top. Rhystic Study triggers, and Jesper draws a card. Garrett passes. Ryan draws, and then plays a Hall of Heliod's Generosity for turn. Burgeoning triggers, and Jesper puts an Oboro, Palace of the Clouds, onto the battlefield, which is a big problem. Ryan then follows up by casting Chalice of the Void, where X equals 1, paying the Rhystic tax. Alela triggers, and Ryan creates a 1/1 fairy. With nothing else, Ryan passes the turn. During his upkeep, Folger wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws, and then starts off by casting Azra Oddsmaker, paying the Rhystic tax. He moves to combat, and Azra triggers. He discards Dockside Extortionist and targets Noble Hierarch with Azra's ability. He attacks Garrett with Noble Hierarch. Garrett takes it, Azra triggers, and Folger draws 2 cards. In his second main phase, Folger plays a Hallowed Fountain into play untapped, paying 2 life. Burgeoning triggers, and Jesper responds to the trigger by tapping his Oboro, Palace in the Clouds for mana, and then activating Oboro, bouncing it back to his hand. Then Burgeoning resolves, and Jesper puts Oboro back on the battlefield. Field of the Dead triggers, and Jesper creates a 2/2 zombie. Next, Folger taps his City of Brass to cast Compost. Finished up, Folger passes. Jesper draws, and starts off by playing a Strip Mine for turn. Field of the Dead triggers, and Jesper creates a 2/2 zombie. He moves to combat, and, not liking Drannith on the table, attacks Ryan with 6 zombies. Ryan blocks 3 of them with Alela, Drannith, and his fairy. He gains 2 through Alela, and then takes the rest. With nothing else, Jesper passes. At the end of Jesper's turn, Garrett activates his Sensei's Divining Top, looking at the top 3 and rearranging. Garrett draws, and then plays a Snow-Covered Island for turn. Burgeoning triggers, Jesper bounces Oboro again, and then puts Oboro back onto the battlefield, creating a 2/2 zombie through Field of the Dead. With no other actions, Garrett passes the turn. During Ryan's upkeep, Jesper sacrifices his Strip Mine, destroying Ryan's Phyrexian Tower. Ryan draws, and then casts Cursed Totem, paying the Rhystic tax. Alela triggers, and Ryan creates a 1/1 fairy. All through, Ryan passes. During his upkeep, Folger loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He draws, and then moves to combat. Azra Oddsmaker triggers, and Folger discards Deathrite Shaman, targeting Noble Hierarch. He attacks Garrett with Noble Hierarch. Garrett takes it, Azra triggers, and Folger draws 2. In his second main phase, Folger casts Talisman of Curiosity, paying the Rhystic tax. Folger passes. Jesper draws. He casts Sensei's Divining Top. This is when Ryan reminds Jesper of the Chalice of the Void on the battlefield, and Sensei's Divining Top is countered. Jesper moves to combat and attacks Ryan with 6 zombies, Dryad Arbor, and Llanowar Elves. Ryan blocks 3 zombies, gains 2 through Alela, and then takes the rest of the damage. In his second main phase, Jesper bounces and replays Oboro, creating a 2/2 zombie. Jesper passes the turn. At the end of Jesper's turn, Garrett spins the top. Garrett draws, and then plays a Snow-Covered Island for turn. Burgeoning triggers, and Jesper bounces and replays Oboro, and creates a 2/2 zombie. Garrett activates Sensei's Divining Top, drawing a card and putting top on top of his library. He transmutes Muddle the Mixture. He fetches up a Grim Monolith into his hand. He casts Grim Monolith, paying the Rhystic tax. Finished up, Garrett passes. Ryan untaps, draws a card, takes no actions, and passes the turn. During his upkeep, Folger wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws, and then moves to combat, triggering Azra Oddsmaker. He discards Marsh Flats, targeting Noble Hierarch. He attacks Garrett. Garrett takes it, Azra triggers, and Folger draws 2. In his second main phase, Folger casts Sylvan Library, paying the Rhystic tax. Folger ends his turn. Jesper draws, and in his first main phase, he activates Oboro, bouncing it back to his hand. He plays Oboro, creating a 2/2 zombie through Field of the Dead. He casts Goblin Bombardment. In response, Ryan casts Force of Negation. Rhystic Study triggers, and Jesper draws a card. Goblin Bombardment is countered and exiled, and then Jesper moves to combat. He attacks Ryan with 6 zombies, Dryad Arbor, and Llanowar Elves. Ryan blocks 2 zombies, gains 2 through Alela, and takes the rest. With nothing else, Jesper gives a turn to Garrett. Garrett draws, and then starts off his turn by casting Narset, Parter of Veils, paying the Rhystic tax. He activates Narset, looking at the top 4, and revealing a Stroke of Genius, and putting it into his hand. Finished up, Garrett passes. Ryan draws, and then plays an Exotic Orchard for turn. Burgeoning triggers, and Jesper bounces and replays Oboro, creating a 2/2 zombie. Ryan then casts Sphere of Resistance, paying the Rhystic tax. Alela triggers, and Ryan creates a 1/1 fairy. Finished up, Ryan passes. At the end of Ryan's turn, Folger casts Vampiric Tutor, paying the Rhystic tax. Chalice of the Void triggers, and counters the spell. Sighing deeply, Folger moves to his turn. During his upkeep, Folger wins his Mana Crypt roll. During his draw step, Folger's Sylvan Library triggers. He moves to draw, but Garrett reminds him of the Narset on the battlefield. Since he did elect to use Sylvan Library, he has to put the card he drew back on top of his library. Folger then moves to combat, triggering Nazra, discarding Chrome Mox, and targeting Noble Hierarch. He attacks Garrett with Noble Hierarch and Narset with Azra Oddsmaker. Now it's important to note that this was a play mistake that no one at the table caught, but Noble Hierarch didn't get the Exalted trigger and therefore didn't deal any actual combat damage to Garrett. Magic is hard. Back to the game. Narset dies and Folger draws 2 through Azra. In his second main phase, Folger casts Seedborn Muse, paying the Rhystic tax. Folger passes the turn. At the end of Folger's turn, Jesper casts Ghostly Flicker, targeting 2 of his lands. Both lands flicker, and Jesper creates 2 zombies through Field of the Dead. Jesper draws and moves to combat, attacking Ryan with 9 zombies, Dryad Arbor, and Llanowar Elves. Ryan blocks 3 zombies, gains 2 from Alela, and takes the rest. In his second main phase, Jesper bounces and replays Oboro, creating a 2/2 zombie. Jesper gives the turn to Garrett. Garrett draws, takes no actions, and passes the turn. Ryan draws, also takes no actions, and passes the turn. During his upkeep, Folger wins his Mana Crypt roll. During his draw step, Sylvan Library triggers, and Folger draws 2 extra. He puts 1 on top and pays 4 life to keep an extra card. He moves to combat, triggering Azra, discarding Felwar Stone, and targeting Seedborn Muse. He attacks Garrett with Seedborn and Azra. Garrett takes it all, Azra triggers, and Folger draws 2. In his second main phase, Folger casts Oko, Thief of Crowns, paying the Rhystic tax. He activates Oko, making a food token. Folger passes. Jesper draws and then moves to combat, attacking Ryan with 8 zombies, Dryad Arbor, and Llanowar Elves. Ryan considered blocking, but knowing he's dead either way, declares no blocks, takes it all, and dies. In his second main phase, now freed up from the Drannith Magistrate, Jesper casts his commander, Omnath, Locust of the Royal. In response, Garrett casts Stroke of Genius, where X equals 4. Rhystic Study triggers, and Jesper draws a card. In response, Folger cracks his food token, gaining 3 life. Then Garrett draws 4 cards. Then Omnath resolves. Omnath's ETB triggers, and Jesper pings Folger for 1. Jesper then casts Crucible of Worlds. He plays a Misty Rainforest for turn. Omnath triggers, getting a +1/+1 counter, Jesper draws a card, and then Field of the Dead triggers, and Jesper creates a 2/2 zombie. He corrects his Misty Rainforest, fetching up a forest onto the battlefield. Omnath triggers, getting a counter, drawing a card, and creating a 2/2 zombie. And then he taps City of Brass to cast Dockside Extortionist. It enters, and Jesper creates 7 treasures. Jesper passes. Garrett draws and starts off his turn by casting Voltaic Key. He uses the key and Grim Monolith to add 5 colorless mana. He casts Basalt Monolith. He taps Basalt for an additional 3. He casts his commander, Teferi, Temporal Archmage. He activates Teferi's second ability, targeting 4 permanents. In response, Jesper casts Nature's Claim, targeting Basalt Monolith. In response, Garrett casts Pact of Negation. In response, Jesper casts Beast Within, targeting Basalt Monolith. It resolves, Monolith is destroyed, and Garrett creates a 3/3 beast. Then Pact counters Nature's Claim, and then Teferi's ability resolves, with Garrett untapping Voltaic Key, Grim Monolith, and an island. He activates Monolith and Key again, adding 5 mana, and then casts the Chain Veil, paying the Rhystic tax. He activates the Chain Veil, giving Teferi another activated ability. He activates Teferi, untapping Soul Ring, Grim Monolith, Voltaic Key, and the Chain Veil. He continues to activate the Chain Veil, and activating Teferi's ability, netting more mana, until Teferi dies. He uses his surplus mana to recast Teferi, paying the Rhystic. This new instance of Teferi recognizes every activation of the Chain Veil up until this point, so Garrett continues to loop the activating of Chain Veil, untapping via Teferi, and recasting Teferi whenever it dies, paying the Ristic tax every time. Once Garrett has enough mana and activations through the Chain Veil, he uses Teferi's first ability over and over again, digging through his entire deck. He then casts Ugin the Spirit Dragon, paying the Ristic tax. Ugin also recognizes all the Chain Veil activations, so Garrett then proceeds to activate Ugin's first ability, bolting each of his opponents until they are dead. Ladies and gentlemen, what a fun game with Jesper. Congrats to Garrett on his win through Teferi, but each player had quite a game. The most valuable card in this match was tough to decide. At first, we thought it should go to Azra Oddsmaker, with how many cards it drew Folger over the course of the game. We also considered Drannith Magistrate. Sometimes it's hard to see in these videos when the lack of something happening is going on. Drannith was stopping a lot of stuff from happening in this game. It was only until Ryan was gone did everyone get the ability to open up their decks. We also considered Oboro, Palace in the Clouds, and Burgeoning for enabling such strong synergy in Jesper's deck. At the end of the day, we had to give the most valuable card to Field of the Dead. The Oboro Burgeoning synergy didn't mean anything without a payoff, and the amount of zombies Jesper created over the course of the game was crazy. We wanted to thank Jesper again for playing with us. It was an absolute blast, and we can't wait to play with him again. We actually played 5 games that day, and you can see the raw gameplay of those extra games as well as this game if you join our Patreon. We have recently added new tiers, so take a look to see if you'd like to receive some of the perks we offer. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Okay, wanted to give a Patreon shout out to Rekeko, CZ, Moxrob, Wayan, Isaac Kaja? Saja? I don't know. Noah Saldana, Trey Payne, Josh Kopp, Zods, and Nick. Thanks a lot, guys.